welcome to Today in Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and we have some wonderful guests today. We have a very special topic. We're going to talk a lot about the library. Scott, our mayor, and I touched on this topic last week, and we have been flooded with all kinds of questions since then, and we're going to do our best to answer them. Bonnie was not able to join us today, but we have lots of information and lots of other folks who are going to join and chat with us. And we'll see if we can chat with Bonnie another time to gain her perspective as well. But for now, we have some really great guests with us. And we're going to dig in and try and answer some of those questions. We're also, of course, going to do an update on some other things that are happening in the community with the mayor before we dive into the library in detail, because this is an opportunity for us to give a general community update about response to the pandemic and what we're doing. And we want to make sure that we address those important topics as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have Mayor Scott Galvin, we have Alderman Jeff Dillon, we have one of our lovely residents, Rachel, and Rachel's last name I'll get next. When we get to you, I'll get it correctly in my notes. Appreciate your kindness. And we have our children's librarian, Dorothy, with us as well. So we've got some great perspectives to share with each other. Before we dive into the library, Scott, I would love to just do a couple of other things to get some updates on some things before I get into specific questions. Are there any COVID-related updates that you would like to share with us?
Well, you know, as far as COVID, as far as the cases and whatnot, we've had a steady decline in Woburn with the cases. You know, some days we have 0, some days 1. Over the weekend, we picked up 6, which is, you know, nothing to be totally alarmed about. We've been in touch constantly. We've got great relationships with Winchester Hospital, and they get good news every day about the emergency room patients. And it's really basically gone back to pretty much normal, you know, and everybody's still guarded with, you know, what's going to be happening. And now we're into phase 2 of the reopening. And I think most people realize that the reopening is being, you know, guided by the state. So we're following state regulations on what we can do and what we can't do. And I just wanted to say we've been working, we've had a great working group. Jeff Dillon's been spearheading it with us on giving restaurants some relief. You know, as some of them now can open up in their parking lots, which, you know, in another day and time, you'd say it's crazy, but anything helps the restaurant. So we've worked really hard in a working group, and Jeff's been part of it along with Mike Anderson, another city councilor, and a number of other department heads, and Tom Skeffington from the licensing board. So we've worked hard to try to give restaurants some relief. And just recently, today, we sent out a new application to downtown restaurants, which will help them with more outside parking on the sidewalk, or, believe it or not, on the street, which I think if you've watched the news, you've seen them doing in Boston and some of the other cities and towns around us. So we're optimistic that we might be able to somewhat help them. We're hoping. We'll see how that goes. You know, I just want to thank Jeff for all his efforts, and let's see if we can help the restaurants. That's what we're trying to do. So the opening's going smoothly. Recreation's starting to get really ramping up and getting ready for summer programs. We're going to be opening the pools in so we've got a date. We're shooting for like July 4th. So we're doing the best we can, and I think we'll be providing great recreation outdoor activities for the kids and the residents of the city.
Well, Scott, that's really great news. I know a lot of people, as it's starting to get really warm, are going to be really glad to hear about the pools. We know there'll be limited capacity.
That's
We're going to
right.
have to ask people to be patient if they come, and, you know, and there are too many people there and such, but that's wonderful that we're going to have that option. And Rory was great last week answering so many questions. And one of the things that she mentioned was the pool decision was pending. So thank you for giving us an update on that. In terms of the restaurants, I know a lot of people have talked about maybe having some times where the center is shut down a little bit. Is that part of the discussions that you were mentioning, or are you thinking of other alternative solutions?
Well, we wouldn't shut down the center, but you know, I'll leave. Jeff can answer some of those questions too. But what we're trying to do is, firstly, allow them to use their sidewalks, where they could do that as long as they don't impede access for residents or pedestrians using the sidewalks. But secondly, we've identified in front of each business where they have parking spots there. They would use those for the tables. They put up some type of jersey barrier for the protection, and that would be where they would, you know, have the the diners sit and eat. And, again, it's every bit helps, in another day and time, I don't think there'd be any interest in that, but it's something that we're trying to do to help our restaurants. And I think we've seen it in other cities and towns. It seems to work. We haven't really, I don't say we haven't, we've had discussions about closing down the center, parts of it. And, we'd like to take this step forward. I think that might be a little bit disruptive for some of the other businesses down there if we were to close parts of the center. But, we'll look at this, see how this goes. And if there's other options, we'll look at those as well.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And I know that if there's a way to test some of those other models and things just in a night or two here and there, people are really eager to help our restaurants stay there. And, we can do takeout and things, which certainly helps the restaurants, but the service in person, even on the sidewalks and outside, helps the servers make some money. It helps with, beverages and consumption and other things that they don't get in a takeout.
Excited to see how it works. If it works well, that'd be great.
My husband and I had the pleasure of having a little bit of a lone brunch on Saturday outside, and it was lovely, even though you wouldn't expect the environment necessarily to be lovely. Yeah. It's nice to be able to do it. So we're grateful for that. Thank you for that update. I do want to talk about the library, and we've had a lot of questions. I want to be really clear. We're going to respect people's individual privacy, and there's some questions that we're not going to talk about here because they are related to union issues and they're related to legal issues and individual people's jobs. And we want to be respectful of those people, and we want to be respectful of the process. But we're going to be very open and transparent about funding. We're going to be very open and transparent about our vision of what the library serves. And we're going to be very transparent about the opening schedule that coincides with what the state guidelines are. I am almost embarrassed to admit I read the Massachusetts Library Association's guidelines for opening in coordination with the state 3 times this weekend because I wanted to make sure that I really had it down. I can assure you it's actually not that complicated, and I shouldn't have needed to read it 3 times. I just felt like I might be missing something, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't. So we'll make sure to address those types of things. There's a couple rumors, Mayor Scott, that I don't know why I called you Mayor Scott. That was a little awkward, but I want to make sure that we dispel right now. Let's talk about funding for the library. So for our next fiscal year, what in fact has been approved funding for the library?
Well, it's in front of the city council, but we did increase the funding level for the library by 2%, just about 2%. But the thing about the library, and I've talked to you about this, Samantha, offline too, is that the city is very committed to the library, and I think that's evident by the building the building that we put together. It was an incredibly collaborative effort between my office, city council, trustees, friends of the library group, residents who really came together. And I think anybody who's lived in Woburn will tell you how long that's been talked about, that let's get a new library, let's do this. And it never got to a certain point. They were always, well, we've got to apply for it. And there was always, whether it be dissension or lack of agreement, and it never got to this point. So, I'm extremely proud to have been a part of getting this library together and built for the community. So, we've made a major investment. We've asked the taxpayers to make a major investment. And I think anybody who's seen the budget since it's been open will tell you that, that my office and the city council has been committed to increasing that budget since it's been open, whether it's by adding new manpower or workers, upgrading the facilities management over there. We've been very committed to it. We continue to be committed to it because we know we've asked the taxpayers a lot to pay for that building. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that my office and the city council are totally committed to making that library the best that it can be, for all the users, and to really be proud of something that we've invested in. I think that, it shows that we are.
Great. I appreciate that. One of the things that I've been hearing about speculation about, I don't know if I've seen anything formal about it, is that the libraries might play a role in our schools, and using the schools as extension or branches almost of the library. Can you shed any light on what that would look like, or if those discussions are in fact happening?
Yeah, those discussions are happening, and there's been an investment. I think that would be probably better for the library director herself to talk about, and to talk about how she in collaboration came up with that. I don't know if it was, I'd rather let her talk about it, but it definitely is it's something that we're excited about, and it's a way to expand the membership, the readership, the usership of the library. So I think, Bonnie, at a time when she can come on and talk, it'd be great, because that was something she's very proud of about doing.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And from your perspective, is this intended to replace the library services during the school day, or to augment the services that might be provided through the school offers?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's designed to augment the services that are provided to the children, to get more into the community, to help them, and really to increase the usership of our library, and to, what better place than, 4,000 students who are, some who may have never been in the library, and now they're going to have that, it's going to be kind of brought right to them. So I think it's a great initiative, and I think, again, it's something that you get Bonnie on and she can talk about. I think it's a real positive for the whole.
Great. I love it. And I know that we have not had full-time librarians in every school for some time anyways. I don't know the exact amount of time. So any support for that kind of literacy and programming in the schools, I'm sure will be welcomed. And we'll talk some more about it with Bonnie, and Matt's coming on in a
I think that'd be
well.
Good.
So
good to have on.
Yeah, we'll talk through that. Thank you for clarity. There was also some question about when will the physical building, this gorgeous thing that we all love and miss terribly, be open for patrons to come in. If I read the information correctly, in phase 3, which I think is upcoming, there is limited ability for people to come into the library. And I just want to say that I think that's important for people, because there are people who rely on computers for job searches or for communication with people from far away, and printing services. That the book delivery has been amazing, by the way. I think we're one of the few communities that actually had people delivering books to people's homes. That's been amazing. But there are some services that you physically need to be in the building for. Right. When do you anticipate clarity on that from the Board of Health and from the library to be cleared to have some services open?
Well, the clarity won't come from the Board of Health. It'll come from the state. It'll come from the Governor's Reopening Advisory Committee. And right now, I think there is some, I've talked to people on the phone, a number of people over the past week. There is a misconception that the library is open now. And I think when people got that notice in phase 2 that libraries are open, it just said libraries are open. But really, they're open for curbside delivery. And that's pretty much what we've been doing since March 15th when we were shut down. I say that, between curbside and delivery. So there's nothing new in that order for the phase 2 reopening. Like you, Samantha, and probably like everybody else, I would love to see the library open right now, at 25%, 50%, whatever it is, and with safety protocols in place. If it were up to me, I would say, let's do it. And, if that were the case, there may be a situation where you say we need more people working because there'll be more requirements and more safety precautions that we need. But right now, we weren't hearing anything like that the libraries would be open even at that level, like you're saying, for computers. In fact, the feedback that we were getting is that they don't know when they're going to open, and so we're in that. That's why we're in this phase now. We're talking about, well, if we're not going to be opening, what are we going to be doing, with our employees? And that's what I wanted to. That's why this whole issue came up. What are we going to be doing if we're not able to open like we'd like to? And you have to look at all areas of your budget, because as I've said, and I've stressed this to the school committee, I've stressed it to the city council, our revenues are going to be going way down this year. Local receipts are down, state revenue, local aid is down, taxes are going to be challenged. So, we're looking at a budget that we put forward that I think was very responsible, but there's still, even though we have a budget, you still, when you get the budget approved, you're still going to be looking at areas where you can save, because there is an uncertainty about, what revenue is going to come in. We've made these estimates, but there is always that uncertainty about where we're going to see the budget head. So from my perspective, we're going to be looking at areas, whether they're approved in the budget or not, where we can still look to save money. And I thought that if the libraries are not going to be open like we would love them to be open, And we have to look at areas that, potentially we could have savings there while we continue to provide the online services, while we continue to provide the curbside and whatever else we're allowed to do. So again, the major issue here is that we are committed to having the best library around and providing the best services that we can under the constraints that exist. And to make a long story short, we just don't know what they are. And like everybody else, we're hoping that, we can open up much sooner than what I'm hearing. And what I'm hearing is there's nothing definitive.
Excellent. I'm going to read, forgive the reading, but I want to read this for the community. And this is really important. I think there was a lot of confusion, as you described, around phase 2. Libraries are open, so we're all expecting to be able to walk into the building with some constraints. That, in fact, was not the guidance from the state or the Massachusetts Library Association. What I'm going to read to you is what pertains specifically to building openings. There are many other guidelines related to phase 3, which we are not yet in, I want to remind people. And what the state will allow, and our library still needs to address, is patrons have access to the following services: requesting materials from the stacks at a service desk. So we will not be able to go in and pull books off the shelf. We'll be able to use public computers for scheduled limited amounts of time, so that may or may not require appointments. And we can have in-person library programs with 10 or fewer participants. That is not to say that that's what we will do, but I wanted to make everyone aware that there are significant restrictions even within phase 3 of what we're allowed to do. And then stage 4 extends that and opens it up. And if everybody's interested in reading it, it's publicly available information. It will put you to sleep, I assure you. It's maybe why I read it 3 times as I was sitting trying to absorb it, but it is available. So I just want to give people the heads up that we are all eager to get back in the library. We do have some restrictions even in phase 3, but please continue to monitor it and look out. And we're glad that our library will continue to serve as best we can, and hope for phase 4 to come quickly. Before we jump off the topic, there's 2 other things, Scott, that I want to run by you. And this one might not actually be for you, but I wanted to ask your thoughts. I've seen some information that there's some CARES Act funding specifically for library virtual programs. Are you aware of our intention to apply for any of those grants?
Yeah, it's funny with the CARES Act. We have, and I think I've talked to you about it. The city has been provided through a per capita formula for us, CARES Act funding, which we're looking to tap into to spend for CARES. It has to be for coronavirus related staffing issues or any type of coronavirus issues that arise. So we have that money that we're asking for to spend on impacts, whether it's in the community or where else in the city. The schools have also been able to get some coronavirus from DESE, Department of Education. They received about $500,000. And in discussing with Bonnie, she's actually aware too of what you had just mentioned. The libraries are entitled to apply for CARES Act funding just for the same specific purpose you talked about. So she's well aware of it, and she's on that applying for that stuff.
Great. And then I learned this week something new, which is that we actually have a board of trustees for the library. I had no idea. I didn't know that until I started trying to learn more about the library and how it operates in our city.
Right.
What's the role of the board of trustees? Even with my own trying to learn, it's actually not clear to me.
Yeah. So the trustees actually have quite a bit of power over the library and the direction of the library, and it's again it is kind of funny. It's a function of the charter, and I think there are 9 trustees, 5 lifetime, meaning they have been appointed and they remain until further notice. So we're working on revising the trustees, but the role is very important that they play, and they meet to determine, the direction of the library. And I do appoint. I think I've got the appointment of all of them, but there are lifetime trustees that have been appointed prior to my term, confirmation by the city council. They again, really, it's basic. Their role is directing the direction of the library.
So operates like a board of directors might for a company,
Right.
like similar, so they approve an operating plan and things like that. Great.
In the
Thank you
city,
for helping me understand that.
the city provides the funding, which is why, we provide the funding. We work on the union issues and all that stuff. So we do provide the important role of the funding. And that's why we have a pretty good relationship with the trustees. I do meet with the chairman of the board, trustees, Richard Mahoney, and talk about different issues that are going on. And, I meet with Bonnie probably once a week as well.
Great. Well, I love it. Before I let you go, because I know you have some other commitments that you've got to run to, you of course are welcome to stay on while we continue our conversation.
Yep.
I'd love to just get your vision for the role a library should be playing in our community. We've made such a great investment, and in my time in raising children, the difference of what we're able to do today versus what we were able to do when my kids as little is almost shocking, to be candid. And I have a lot of jealousy, if I'm being honest, about the things that we're now able to offer. But from your perspective, what do you see the library's core function being in our community?
Well, there are a number of things that if I can answer that in a little more roundabout answer, but there are a number of things that I think it's important for communities to provide to their residents, to make the place that we live, like you said, you're a little bit jealous, but to make it a better place to grow up, to raise a family, either a business to come. Businesses they like to see certain amenities that if they're locating in a community, the people who work for them, they want to know that there's a community that is providing good amenities. And I always say we've built brand new schools. We built a new high school. We built 5 brand new elementary schools. We're investing in parks, as you can see, and the library is a very important piece of that for our residents. And it's a great place where people can come, obviously meet other people, get together. And this library, when we built this, there were a number of detractors about you don't need a library. You've got everything on your computer. There's no need to go. But one of the great things about a libraries in these days is they become community centers, more or less, and they definitely provide a place for people who don't have access to, whether it be computers, internet, some of the things that are important to help you get ahead. So I think that's, it's really just a great resource for the entire community, and starting from children right up to adults. They have the book clubs. My mother's a member of the book club. It's a very good place for people to be able to come feel a part of the community. And right now, I know we're all feeling a little bit robbed by the coronavirus, but we're making all these sacrifices for a good purpose. And I think that when we get out of this together, the library is going to be stronger than it ever was, and it's still managing to have an impact through this whole thing with online services. And it's just a little unfortunate we're going through these other issues surrounding it.
Well, I think thinking of it as a community center is such an important function. I have to tell you, one of my most cherished items in my home is actually from the old library. When the library closed for renovation, they had a sale of some of the things that they were not going to be carrying over to the new library. And one of those things was an old stand-up globe. And all the countries are wrong, right? They've all been renamed from when it was. What I cherish about that is when you go to Massachusetts and you look at the United States on the map, it's all rubbed out. It's where all the people who came into the library and looked and said, that's where I live. And they touched the globe and they rubbed it all out. And it's one of those things that we deeply love in our house. And it's a little broken and the footing is off, but it has a cherished spot. And I think that as we were looking through all the things about the library, and I'm glad you mentioned that we talk a lot about families and children, and because there's an amazing amount of work that goes there, but it's also a really big service for the adults in our communities, people who come to do research, people who just need a quiet place to think, people who need access to computers, book clubs that are targeted for adults as well as for teens and other activities. I myself have taken classes there on sewing, was one of the ones that I took, which is great. And I've seen lots and lots of other things. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. Thank you for doing that. With that, I'd love to bring Jeff into the conversation. Welcome, Jeff. I know that you've volunteered in the library in the past and have a passion for all the important work that gets done there. I appreciate you joining our conversation.
Absolutely. Before we talk about that, I do want to thank Mayor Galvin. We all know what a great mind he has with budgets and numbers, but a lot of people don't know, should know, that he's such a hands-on mayor as well. I was volunteering at the library right before the virus shut it down, and I'm putting my books away, doing my thing, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey Jeff, how you doing?" It was a Saturday afternoon about 11:30, and there's Mayor Galvin walking through the library, making sure everything's good, making sure everyone's happy. So he's certainly a hands-on man. I know I appreciate his effort.
Well, thank you for that. We are very lucky to live in a community where we see each other around quite a bit. And that's one of the things that I do love about our community is we see the mayor, we see city council around, we see school committee members at many types of events. We're really fortunate that even though we live in a city, it feels like a small town sometimes in those ways. And I think that's really great. So thank you for putting those books away back on the shelves. My first job ever in my entire life was in college. I worked the front desk at my college library. And I'm going to admit the reason I took that job is I wanted to learn the cute boys' names. And I knew if I had to check out their books, I would have an excuse to do that. But in fact, while that might have been my motivation, it was actually a really wonderful experience. I ended up working there for most of my time in college, and I loved it because it was this sense of community, even back in those days, quite a few years ago. So thanks for being part of our library. Tell us about your vision of how you see what the library should be in our community.
Sure. I think anyone who knows me, I have two passions in Woburn. First, or maybe second, depending which day it is the library in Horn Pond. But we'll save Horn Pond for another show. But the library, from the time I was a small child, I just have pleasant memories of visiting the library. Back then they had a children's room as well, not quite what it is today, but many visits there, pleasant time spent there. And then as we grow older, even till this day, part of every vacation that my wife and I have start with a trip to the library to get our books out. So the library is an amazing place. When you stop to think of it, how many other places is like the library? If you go to a concert, if you go to a sporting event, they have the $20 seats and the $1,000 seats. Yet we're blessed when we go to the library, we all get the same benefit, the same service with a free library card. So it's just a great opportunity to learn, to have fun, to meet people as well. My grandson and my daughter spend many mornings and afternoons at the children activities, and she'll come home and she'll say, well, look, I got to tell you what we did at the library today. So it's just whether you're 2 years old or 102, it's a great place to spend some time. And I often say to some of the people I meet, some of the new constituents that maybe just moving into the neighborhood or into Woburn, I'll say, have you visited our library yet? And they'll say, no. I says, you got to go get a library card. You're going to thank me later. So it's really a great place, and it's very well used. And I know we're all waiting to get back there, as I am as well.
Oh, I really feel so. I think it's safe to say, but I never like to make assumptions, Jeff, that you were supportive of the budget increases that we put in place to make sure the library.
Absolutely. Again, the library's institution of Woburn that should be taken care of and cherished.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable place, and we are so fortunate to have such a, not just a wonderful programming and access to books, but what a beautiful building and what amazing history is part of that, and we are very, very fortunate to have that. I know this is slightly off topic, but because Scott mentioned it earlier, I would like to just get your perspective. Anything that you want to add to our discussions on the restaurants and outdoor seating, and anything we can do to help support the community in that way?
Sure. I had a few conversations at the very beginning with Mayor Galvin and what we could do to help the downtown restaurants. I'm much older than you, so I remember when downtown wasn't the busy, productive, pleasant place it is today. At one time, it was mostly abandoned. So I know a lot of people worked really hard over the years to make it the nice downtown that we have today with the restaurants and the shops and such. So when you think what could happen if they didn't get the support, it's time for us all to pitch in and see what we can do for the, as well as the merchants, but the downtown restaurants. And the restaurants are really a unique deal that they're all storefronts for the most part. So you have the 99, they have plenty of parking and there's plenty of room and there's alternatives to interior dining. You really have to look outside the box to figure out what we can do for downtown. And Mayor Galvin once again put together an advisory board, and we met 4 or 5 times, and I've talked to him 3 or 4 times at length as well. And once again, being the hands-on guy he is, we came up with a couple solutions. And I noticed today the email came with the application for any downtown restaurant that wants to make an application, that we're going to work with them and get them some sidewalk space or some parking area space right in front of their restaurant so they can continue with their takeout, which right now during this is probably their most bread and butter part of the business, but every little bit helps. So we really do have to not think in typical ways and business ways that everything used to run. We have to get creative and try to figure this out and make the best out of it. So it was my pleasure to help any way I could. There was a lot of people that put a lot of effort into it. So I'm curious and anxious to see that it works well. I'm being optimistic.
Well, I love that. And I do know that there's some challenges. We do need to make safe walkways for people who, need to be on the sidewalks, and make sure that folks who might be in a walker or a wheelchair or other concerns are able to get by. But I'm so glad to see we're doing anything. And the marketer and the total foodie in me wants like theme nights so that we can group things together in a parking lot and rent food trucks. I don't know. I'll spend a lot of money. That's all I know is I like to eat. We'll figure it out. So I appreciate the moves forward, and we'll, please let us know how we as a community continue to support those restaurants as we experiment with these things. And thank you so much for your thoughts about the library and making time. Jeff always answers my phone calls and even my Facebook messages, which I know annoy him because he'd really rather I just call him. And I'm usually like on a work call sending a message, and he's super responsive. And we appreciate that as a community, again, making yourself available to us. We know there's no easy answers, but your support and your outreach to the community is deeply valued. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad to help anyone in Woburn that needs any help or information. Reach out to me, and thank you, because I'm getting better at that Facebook deal.
Well, I appreciate it so much. I want to switch gears a little bit and invite Rachel Kuberry. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Rachel?
Kuberry, yep.
Oh, I am so glad. I am not the best at names, so we appreciate that very much. Rachel is a resident and has a family here in Woburn and uses the library a lot. And I actually didn't know Rachel until a couple of days ago, but when we were exploring questions and people talking in the community, Rachel was really out there and advocating. And so she was kind enough to take my invitation to join me today. Before I have you jump in, Rachel, I just want to read a couple of the examples now that I got from the community, because I think it's really great. And then we'll dive into some questions for you. Elise talked about, so just for those who are watching, I sort of put a blanket invitation out there to the community through the Woburn Residents Facebook group that said, hey, I'm going to be doing a show about the library. I know you have a lot of questions. Tell me about some of the things that the library has meant to you and some of your best memories. And I have to tell you, I was almost tearing up reading some of these. They were amazing. And I won't read all of them because we don't have the time to allocate that, but I do want to pick out a couple ones that I think are really great. and I encourage people to go check out the full list, and I'm happy to supply the full list to people who are interested. Lots of conversations about the teddy bear picnics, but this one really touched me. This is from Elise. My favorite part is seeing my generally shy son walk into the library like he owns the place. He feels welcomed and loved. The librarians take the time to know each child. And Dory, you get a shout out here as well, specifically, always willing to listen and provide expert guidance. And then Jennifer popped in and said, oh my goodness, yes, the recommendations are awesome. Help my children explore things that they love. Sometimes we'll just pop in and make a recommendations. And, you know, it just touched me to think about that. Someone has found a home for themselves and a confidence being in the library. And that's really a special experience, and that's really hard to replicate. I'll also just read one more here, and then we'll dive into questions for Rachel. This is from Becky. I love our library and always tell the librarians they're simply the best. My children adore the programs, but one outstanding example came to mind immediately. Shortly after they reopened, I asked for help collecting picture books to represent all the stories mentioned in Amazing Grace for my deaf elementary students, most of whom are immigrants and level 1 and 2 English learners. Most are not familiar with the fairy tales and references. And I'm just gonna summarize a little bit. It's a beautiful thing that's written here, but basically it was like this amazing experience, presented all kinds of level and age appropriate stories and introduced these students who might not have had another way of getting access to these amazing stories, and it was more than she hoped and dreamed. So with those wonderful, touching stories about how the library has impacted our residents and our neighborhoods, Rachel, tell us a little bit about how you and your family use the library.
So my family is myself and my husband and our 2 small children who recently turned 3 and 5. So we saw the library through closure when I was very pregnant, and that was very sad. And we spent a lot of time at the temporary library with our little baby and toddler, and we're thrilled when the new library opens. So when I think about the library, I really think about the new library, even though that's a shorter part of my library experience here in Woburn. And so the library really helps us build a love of literacy with our children. And that's both, you know, understanding that books are a fun place, like a fun activity. The library is a fun place to go. The librarians are trustworthy community helpers for them to be able to independently build relationships with and have interactions with. So using the library to build our love of literacy is really important, but also the community piece. And I think the first statement you read, I think, was Elise's story about how her son owns a place when he goes in. And I feel the same way, that it's a place that we know is safe in our community to let our kids sort of spread their wings a little bit. So my children are really young, but I feel really comfortable letting them be a little more independent there, because the librarians know them. The other patrons might know them. I know the building very well, so I know that it's safe, and I know where they might, you know, go in this corner where I can't see them. So it's a great place to build some independence and community for them, let them meet people that I might not introduce them to. So they're getting the chance to have some independence in the community in a safe way. And then my husband and myself, I use it as a quiet workplace because it's between my work and my home. So I occasionally stop by on my way home from work to finish some things up. We've both taken classes there. I have meetings with colleagues in the meeting rooms. We use it for plenty of books. And in, you know, a while ago, it was our soul. You guys carried us through all the movies and digital entertainment until we finally cracked and got Netflix a few short years ago. So we, I think as adults, heavily use the library as well. So
I love that. My mother, Diane, uses audiobooks a lot. She does a lot of driving back and forth to Florida under normal circumstances, not right now, but even just around. And she is a huge fan of those, and a big fan of some other things as well. Those are great examples. And even in the old library where you sort of went down those, you know, those tight stairs, and there's this like musky, room, I still have these really great memories of my children being like running into the library and me yelling, "Stop running, you're in a library." But knowing that they were really welcomed and that we could curl up with a book and read, and they were excited about reading and they were excited about learning about something. I don't know. Sometimes we would have some crazy topic we would go in and we would ask, they would, talking to independents, I would have them ask the librarian, "Great, I want you to go ask for whatever it is that you want." And the librarians always stopped, took some moment, went and helped them find something that would really tickle their fancy. And now we've added additional really amazing digital capabilities that we didn't have when my children were young. But those are all really great examples. When you think about the ideal library and the community, Rachel, what's your vision for how this might be able to use across our city?
So I really want to echo what Mayor Galvin said about the library really being a hub for the community or a community center. I think our library does a really nice job with that, and looking at the people that it services, the people in the community, and connecting those people to resources, services, activities, events, and information that will improve their lives and thereby make the community stronger. And so when I think about what that means for myself and my kids, it's really about giving them access to literacy activities and independently accessing information that I might not spoon feed them, so they get outside of my little bubble, and that they also start to build that community, which leads to civic engagement and bigger and better things outside of the library. But we have that opportunity that the library builds within. So.
I think the library closing remind us how important all of those things are. And when I read through all the stories that people gave, and I know it's a sample, but it's a sample of, I think, representative of how people use it. They all came down to what you're talking about, Rachel, is the interaction of people and the things that were happening. Yes, the books matter. Yes, the programs matter. But there is a sense of belonging that the library provides for people, and the ability to have such an array of programming that kind of, no matter what might be my thing, right? I have a way of exploring my thing at the library, whether it's independent study and help from a research desk person helping me explore it, whether there's a class that I could maybe join, whether it's, just tapping into materials across. And I think we've all missed it more than we realized we would. I don't want to speak for other people, but I know I took a little bit for granted being able to just pop in. And just like all the other things that we've had to not pop into, this has been one that has been a challenge. And I just want to tell you, like my hero, a 3- and 5-year-old home all this time. I told my husband that, one of the only brilliant things, well, we've done a couple brilliant things. One of them is having children young. So we are not in the quarantine with young children. So thank you for, hanging in there. Is there anything else about what you envision the library to be, or what you want to make sure as we reopen, as we take this opportunity to reimagine what our library is moving forward, that you want to make sure we keep doing and we keep at our heart, or maybe something new that you'd like to see added?
I think what's been hard for me and my children, and you sort of just got at, is the loss of that connection to people with losing the library space because of the pandemic. And so I think, I actually work in technology and connecting people in my job. And I think that has been something that these Zoom calls and these watching things, you're still kind of alone in that a lot. And I think I would really like to see the library work hard between now and when we get back to normal, which I think might be a ways off, to figure out innovative ways to connect people in the community, to connect my children with the librarians that they know and love, to connect us with those groups of people that were at the events that are similar interests that we went to that event for. That's hard to do when you're watching sort of a streaming concert or something, how to have that connection with other people. And I think that's going to take some really creative thought and people working together to come up with ways to do that, because it's so needed right now with the pandemic and our loss of a lot of the social structures that we relied on and, like you said, took for granted. Now 3 months in, we're hurting for it. So
Yeah, we're anxious for it. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today to share your perspective. I think it's really important that we help celebrate all the wonderful things that our library does, but also share our yearning to get back to some of the things that we haven't been able to do. And we're going to have to get creative about schools. We're going to have to get creative about community activities. And I agree with you, the library can play a really valuable hub for us to be able to do that in creative ways. And
it's nice to hear such support of the library, so that I know I really have faith that we can get there and figure out some innovative ways to help people make those connections to each other and the community resources. So thank you for having me.
oh, I'm so glad that you could join us. Thank you very much. I'd like to now invite Dorothy Karlin, who's been our children's librarian. Many of the comments named you by name, Dory, so I won't make you blush by continuing to read all the amazing praise, but I do think that there's something special about the adventure of going into a library, and what is amazing to me about libraries in general, and particularly our library, is that it's unique to each person and each family and each group that comes in. That library becomes something very different. Just like books take us to all kinds of places and ideas and thoughts, creating a library that does that well is actually, I suspect, way harder than we imagine. You're an expert, you're a librarian who has many years experience and training, and you see all the behind the scenes things that we don't. Tell us a little bit about how librarians create the ability to take everybody on all the different adventures they want to go on.
Well, thank you for having me. And well, there's a lot that goes into what the library is, of course. And I've had a really special sort of trajectory here in Woburn, because I started while we were in the temporary space. So we didn't actually have a space at all. We had Cummings Park, and we were very grateful for that, but I couldn't do story times there. I couldn't do other programs there. So it really I had to do, for the first year and a half that I worked in Woburn, I had to do a lot of soul searching, like what does it mean to be a librarian if you don't really have your library yet? And it's so much of what people have been talking about is like figuring out how to make those community connections and how to have the right resources for the community. So while we were in the temporary space, I was working with the senior center, and they let me do the story times there, which was this amazing, it was such an amazing collaboration, because I ended up having senior readers and also just everyone that was at the senior center. Thursday mornings was a huge highlight, because there was like actually this like migration of toddlers into the senior center, and it was truly amazing. So in doing that, and then on Tuesday afternoons, they let us do craft programs there. And then we were doing story times over at Washington Crossing, which is a housing, it's an apartment complex just behind Cummings Park. And it really brought home how much the library really is about community connection, which was really interesting as we moved into this gorgeous building with so many innovative services. And it was, it was the same, there were a lot of new staff. Most of youth services is new, but there were also all these really experienced staff who'd worked in that really small building for so many years and had to just totally change how they were working at the library, and everyone had to do all these this amazing adaptation to figure out how to make the services work in this new space. And it's been this amazing experience. And I had this revelation sort of early on in coronavirus that I was like, our grand opening, we had 3,000 people in the building, was March 16th, 2019. And on March 16th, 2020, we closed. And I'm gonna cry. And then I haven't heard anything from the library since then. And it's been sorry, I'm gonna cool and collected.
Hey, don't apologize. This is why the library is special, because the folks who work there care deeply, and they care about the community, and they care about what we're doing. So I hope in listening to all the things that people have said on the show, but also prior and communicating out to me, feel that.
It's amazing. This is a slight side note. I had a real revelation the other day that normally if I sing a song, I make a room full of 100 people clap for me, and I am a terrible singer. I've not been getting the same feedback, so it's really
We
nice.
won't make you sing on here, I promise. We won't do.
Well, if you do, I will make you clap. We
that.
always clap for ourselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and in terms of like the actual work of making that space and making the programs, there's so much that goes into figuring out what people want, what people are looking for, and I'm like always taking input from staff members. Like my specific areas is children's and youth services, but we're always listening to hear what people want, trying to offer it. We work with a lot of community members to offer programs, so that we have someone from early intervention that comes in and does music time. We have a group that they have a grant for early literacy programs. So we have Natalia and Ara come in and they do a program, and it's all based on play. And those are for the younger kids. And then, we've got Mr. Carey, who I think you've probably heard some awesome things about him, because it's just really awesome having a male role model in the children's room. And he's done a lot of our makerspace programs, and Samantha too. And then and Mary, everyone knows, has been there for the last, I think, 14 years now, and she's been doing Code Club, so we all learn new tricks. So, and she's been in Code Club and Friday Flicks, so she's and Samantha does Lego Club, so everyone sort of figures out something that they can sort of embrace and bring to the public and advertise and make sure people know about, make sure it's a safe experience and a fun experience. So
I'm glad you raised that, because I think those are good examples, because a lot of times when we think about library and children, we often think about the very young children spectrum of this, but it's equally important to have the opportunity to connect with preteens and teens. And
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Prior to the renovation, we probably weren't able to we really didn't have much. They tried some game nights, they had tried some book clubs.
Well, we didn't have a teen librarian until January of 2019. So Annie started then, and she has so much experience in the maker space. So she's been doing programs there. She brought our, this blows my mind because of where I was as a teenager, but Dungeons and Dragons and D&D has been such a, she helps run with help from the kids, a D&D with 25 people. It is, I don't even
madness. For those of you who don't play D&D, 25 people is total madness. I don't play myself, but I have adult children who do, and I know enough to know how much work that must be, and I love it. That's awesome.
My gosh. No, it's I've been in the room during it, and I'm like, this, you leave the room and you're like, I can't hear anymore, but it's just that much fun. And video games. And
I'm glad that you brought that up. I want to take a step back and just think about for the moment, sort of philosophy about libraries. So we know it as a community center, but I tend to think of a library as a gathering place and a community bonding, which is critically important, but also something much deeper than that to sort of stimulate our mind and let us feed our curiosity. And frankly, we need that as humans, and school clearly plays a role in that, but school is very structured and has things, and not everything that we want to explore is available in school or in a formal class. Tell me about the way you think about curating our books and our programs to help feed those things.
Let's see. So in terms of the collection, I work really hard to, again, respond to what people are asking for. If I notice people are asking for something a lot, I will buy more books in that area. And also, if there's something that's big in the news, and we'll be like, let me look at the collection. Let me see what holes I have. I've put a lot of work in the last few years to make sure that we have diverse books in the children's room. But every time, that something happens, and you want to make sure that parents have the tools to talk about it with their kids, that kids are seeing diverse faces in their books, and not just in all their books, not just books that are about sort of issues. And so there's that. I believe collections should be very responsive to the community, and very and of course I read reviews and I see what's coming out that's going to be that people are predicting will be popular, is highly reviewed. But I mean, there is probably never going to be a book about Roblox that is going to win a national
It's
book
going to win
award.
a literary award. There's no Roblox literary awards coming.
No, but I am going to buy those books about Roblox and about really bought a lot of books about coding and things that I know, like, and also it's interesting because we do these programs, and some of them are ones that are, our ideas, some are coming from the community, some are, we'll have someone like Jency Casey last year, or I don't even know what time is anymore, but she was like, I work in an early event intervention, but I've been wanting to do a sleep workshop, and I'm like, let's do it. We'll see what sticks. And she did this wonderful sleep workshop for parents who are doing sleep training. And then Colleen Cormier did a program for us she's doing her MPH. She's I kept NP and PA mixed up. She's a nurse practitioner, I believe, but she's doing her MPH, and she's like, I've been working on all this about nutrition. Can I talk to parents who don't have kids with allergies, but have kids whose friends have allergies? I
was in that class.
Wasn't it an amazing class?
It was great. Yeah. I'm actually really glad, Dory, that you brought up that as an example, because I think one of the things that's great about a library is that it can create programs and opportunities for very small groups and very niche interests. Yeah. Whereas some of the things, like if you're going to go to a university or to a school system, there's sort of a minimum number of people you need to rally around an idea before you can experiment with it. And I cherish that the library is able to offer a program to help new people, so that's 5 people in it, or the 10 people who came to the allergy class. And then you have things that attract hundreds of people.
Yeah, no, some attract hundreds, and I was like, New Year's Eve, I think there was like 200 people in that room. I wasn't quite expecting that, but it was amazing. And the interesting thing, like, so I talk a lot about this, and a lot is the space and coming to the library, but I think like what everyone's been saying is that connection that's so important. And I think it's what's really been missing the last couple, as Rachel was saying, that you've got a lot of, everyone's feeling so disconnected right now. And, I've been talking to coworkers, and we have all of these awesome ideas for how that we can bring virtual programming in ways that provide that culture, that community connection. Like, and just like, even if we can't see each other in person, there are ways that we can see each other. Like that first week before the staff was sent home, we were doing live story times, and we were doing live crafting, but that was just, we were just like, what is going on in the world? What can we do now? And then as we started to be like, oh, this is what it's like now. And then we were told we couldn't continue to offer those programs. So we have so many ideas. I know Hermaine has been doing her own, she's been doing it on her own, but she was doing her novel ideas book club with the Mayor's Mother, and she's been doing that every month, and she's going to continue over the summer. So if you're interested, reach out to us, reach out to Hermaine. But we have other ideas of like how we can reach out through whatever, like find people where they are. So we have some staff members who, like probably a lot of your viewers, have really fallen down the TikTok rabbit hole this last couple of months. So they're ready to go on to TikTok, and we have and clearly Zoom and Facebook Live and all these different ways that we connect people, but really honestly, even just the phone, because we have a lot of patrons who don't have internet connection and really rely on the library for the internet. And we really want to be able to reach out and talk to them. Like I've been talking to my, the senior, so when I came back from the senior center, a lot of my readers came with me. So I've been talking to them, and they're doing well, but like that I don't know how amazing the phone call was for them, but for me, it was amazing to be able to talk to them. And we have all these staff members who have lived in Woburn for decades and have worked in the library for a long time. And they have all these personal connections with community members. And they like that the library could be this amazing platform for them to sort of strengthen and continue those connections and all this momentum we've had from a year's worth of like so much programming in the library, that there's a lot of that we could bring on. I was really excited about last fall. I'd got applied for state funding for a virtual an online logging program for reading, and I was planning on making this summer reading program a hybrid virtual and in-person program. And in March, it very quickly looked like it was going to be more virtual than in person. But for the last 2 years, we've done a really popular read to bead program where kids they get a bingo board each week, and this is the older kids. Younger kids are in the rubber ducky club, and I can talk about that if you have time. But they keep track of their reading, and they do all these challenges, and for the challenges and for the reading, they get beads for their necklace. And so at the end of the summer, they have this very tangible thing that shows like how engaged they were this summer. And the challenges, some are reading related, some introduce different library resources, like a lot of the digital resources that people suddenly learned this last couple of months. They learned more better. And then some are just keeping kids engaged civically or doing acts of kindness, like going out and picking up litter or writing a letter to their mailman and things like that. So we have all these great ideas. So I've been really sad that I haven't been able to implement them. So I'm really hoping that I will have a chance to do so, because I think
I really want to thank you for sharing it. We are terribly over time.
Sorry,
I could keep going for an hour more about the library. I really value it. Thank you for giving us a behind. It's actually really helpful to understand the vast array. I mean, each of us has probably a little bit that we see, and we don't see all of the rest of it. And we know that there's a lot of hard work that goes into these things. And so we thank you for that. And thank you to all of my guests today for sharing your experiences with the library. This is a cherished part of our community, and I know all of us are continuing to support it. I'm pleased to see from a budgetary standpoint that the city council and the mayor are also supportive. We're going to hope to get back in that building soon. But my hope is that some of the innovation and ideas around the digital get to play out even when we get back to something that feels more like normal. There's value in some of those things. And for example, the book delivery to my house was just a convenience, but I know there are people who are housebound. And so maybe there's an aspect of programs like that we can continue as we go. Dory's dying to say one more thing. So go again. I'm going to let you do one more thing and then I'm going to wrap up.
I just wanted to say that we do have housebound delivery. We've always had that.
See, what I told you is all these things that we never know, right? So,
yeah.
So we're really grateful for that, for all that the library does and will continue to do for us, and I really appreciate that. I shared with our listeners and viewers yesterday, a little bit earlier in our conversation, that phase 3 will allow some people into the building, but still not at full capacity. And then we'll be monitoring. So we'll be looking very closely for that. I just remind people to continue to be kind to each other, to continue to support each other, and continue to be a champion for all the amazing work and programming that happens at the library. It happens because a lot of people do a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And we sometimes only see the beautiful building. So thank you for reminding us of all those pieces, the volunteers like Jeff was describing, the families who come and participate and are so generous with each other and welcome of each other, and the library staff who work so very hard to meet our needs and to adjust and grow as we as a community adjust and grow and lose things. And I hope there'll be always a little corner that I can curl up with in my book and just, have that moment. I still like to touch and feel those things, but I also love that I can have an audiobook in my car as I'm on a long drive. So super valuable. Thank you to our community for joining us.